JEM Publishing presents the unabridged recording of Rescuing Melissa, The Guardian Hostage Rescue Specialists, Book 1, written by Ellie Masters, narrated by Aubrey Vincent and Matt Haynes.
6. A Superhero. CJ. CJ had left St. John's Emergency Department. One good deed down. If Melissa Evans hadn't been married, he would have asked for her number. They'd connected. He hadn't misread the vibe between them. But she was married, and he respected that. Shame he'd never see that pretty jogger again. A truck came to a screeching halt in front of the emergency department, nearly running CJ over. "Help! I need help!" A man hopped out of the beat-up truck. "What's up?" Years of training kicked in. CJ didn't even question his actions. "In the back." The man flailed his arms. Blood saturated the man's shirt, and a nasty wound on his neck oozed. Adrenaline was probably the only thing keeping him upright, but he didn't seem concerned about his injuries. Wide eyes and a crazy stare spoke to the man's fear, and he looked to be in the early stages of shock. CJ moved to the side and looked in the bed of the truck. Holy crap. He flipped down the tailgate and jumped inside. A woman, about 6 or 7 months pregnant, laid beside a hunting dog. A metal rod pinned the dog and the woman to a large chunk of wood. It looked like the side of a barn. With a whimper, the dog's tail wiggled when it smelled CJ. One arm of the U-shaped metal rod had been shoved through its leg and had trapped the dog to the wood planking. The other end of the rod punctured the woman's shoulder. CJ couldn't tell if the piece of metal had gone through muscle or had pierced her lung. He felt for the woman's pulse. Thready, but present. She was breathing, but unresponsive. A horrific scene of a woman and a dog trying to outrun a tornado flashed through his mind. Easy, boy. He stroked the dog's muzzle, letting the animal smell him. If the dog moved, it might worsen the woman's injuries. It whined and beat its tail. The poor thing tried to lick his hand, but couldn't lift its head. How the man loaded his wife and the dog into the back of the truck amazed CJ. The man's wounds, cuts, scrapes, and gouges down to muscle were as severe as the woman's. CJ attempted to reassure the man. She's breathing. The labored rise and fall of the woman's chest said she didn't have much time. Oh, thank you, Jesus. The man swayed on his feet. And the dog? Country boy was going to pass out any minute. Get help. When the man didn't move, CJ added, The dog's okay. His command proved unnecessary because emergency personnel spilled out of the entrance, running to the truck. Someone inside had been watching. Overwhelmed, perhaps, but this staff was kicking ass. CJ pointed to the man, worried he'd be overlooked once they saw the pregnant woman. Someone take care of him before he collapses. For good measure, he added, You're going to need a lot more help than that. How far was the nearest vet? A nurse in purple scrubs gave him a strange look, and then instructed the others what to do. A man in green scrubs gathered the husband into a wheelchair and bustled him inside. The nurse pinched her lips when she saw the gory scene of the woman and dog. She had to have previous military experience or trauma training because she didn't seem shocked by the extent of the woman's injuries. Small hospitals didn't see this kind of trauma. She pressed her fists to her hips and took in the scene. CJ read her identification badge. Florence Reynolds was a doctor, not a nurse. His training kicked in, and CJ gave his report. She's breathing, and her pulse is thready, weak. Can't tell if the rod is in muscle or pierced her lung. Breathing is labored, and she's unresponsive.
You know them?
Dr. Reynolds jumped into the bed of the truck. The pregnant woman moaned. No, I was leaving when he pulled up.
You a paramedic?
Yeah. That was but one piece of his particular skill set. As an ex-Green Beret and Delta operative, it served him well in the military. As guardian, it continued to prove useful. She eyed him. Legally, she shouldn't allow him to touch her patient, but the emergency room was overrun. She nodded as if deciding her next move.
Okay, Mr.
Rowans. C.J. Rowans.
Mr. Rowans, are you willing to help me get her out of this truck?
Yes, ma'am.
Good.
She signaled to her staff, who had brought out 2 gurneys and an orange bag of medical supplies.
We need to move them as a unit and deal with separating them later.
This woman knew her stuff. He breathed out a sigh of relief.
Get to the front and push while my team pulls them onto the gurney. What the hell are they stuck to?
I think it's siding from a barn. He moved into position. 4 staff members waited with the gurneys. Dr. Reynolds checked vitals on the pregnant woman, and the dog then jumped down. It took more work to get the pregnant woman and her dog out of the truck than he'd anticipated.
Thank you, sir. We've got it from here.
Dr. Reynolds stuck out her hand to CJ. My pleasure.
Can you move the truck?
She asked.
Park it in the lot and drop the keys at the desk?
I'll take care of it. What about the dog? Dr. Reynolds cracked a smile.
Don't worry about the dog. I'll make sure he's taken care of.
He moved to the truck, turned in the keys, and went to see if his hotel had survived the storms. Before heading to the prison, he wanted to wash and change clothes. He'd thought of little else in the past 3 years. He needed to be there when the last breath left Scott Patterson's body. The bastard deserved worse than death, but CJ would take death by lethal injection. As he searched for his hotel, his thoughts wandered back to the brunette with the mismatched running gear and lacy pink bra. If he didn't have to be at the prison, he would have stayed. Overhead, deep blue skies looked down on him. The calm after the storm freaked him out. Some parts of town had been scoured off the face of the earth, while other sections remained untouched. He stopped 3 times to help others in distress before pulling into the hotel parking lot. It had survived without a scratch. As he grabbed his gear out of the back, a cell phone rang. Not his. Looking for the source of noise, he found a phone in the back of the car. It must have fallen out of Melissa's pocket, although he had seen nothing resembling pockets in her tight running gear. An unregistered number flashed on the screen. The phone rang 6 times before the person on the other end gave up. Maybe it went voice message? Less than a minute later, the phone chimed again. Same number. Persistent caller. It might be a family member looking for Melissa, or the husband. Lucky bastard. He pressed the button to accept the call. Hello? Hello? Hey, who the fuck is this? An angry voice rasped. Where's Sissy? Sorry, dude, you have the wrong number. This is Melissa's cell. I know my wife's phone number. CJ frowned. Melissa Evans? The man's voice sounded familiar, but CJ couldn't place where he may have heard it. Evans my ass, the bastard on the other end said. You tell my wife to keep her fucking legs shut, or I swear I'll shut her legs myself. I don't care what she told you, she's mine. Do you hear? That bitch belongs to me. I don't like your tone of voice. No man should speak about his wife with such disrespect. She better not be fucking you. The guy was crazy. I met your wife today. Then why the fuck are you answering her phone? Because I dropped her off at St. John's. She's having emergency surgery. I suggest you settle down before visiting her. How did a pretty woman get involved with such an ass? If this guy could be abusive to a stranger, what was he capable of behind closed doors? Like that's fucking possible, asshole. How do I know you're not lying? You don't. CJ fisted the phone until his knuckles turned white. He regretted telling the bastard Melissa was in the hospital. This conversation is over. A string of profanity ripped through the phone, colorful in its depth and breadth. Maybe he should get back to Melissa's bedside and stand guard against this creep. 7. Let's play Pierce. The park bubbled with the noisy cries of children, squeaking and squealing as they clambered up, over, and around the playground equipment. My ears hurt listening to them. This part of the town fared well after the severe weather from the previous day. There were a few fallen branches, but nothing serious. Even the playground equipment and surrounding grass were nearly dry. Overhead, the sky shimmered with a deep blue. Watchful mothers parked themselves on benches, minding strollers, purses, and the ever-necessary stash of kitty box drinks and baggies of Cheerios. Thank God I never spawned a tiny human. They were, as a group, a waste of breath. Ignoring the children at play, I considered my approach. I'd stolen a yippy dog, terrier, or Scotty. I didn't know and I didn't care. He was sniffing in my pocket where I'd stashed treats to entice him. At least he wasn't sniffing my crotch. The dog was a tool, and I'd let the little mutt go when I was through. He yipped again, and I decided to call him Yip for the day. It had taken time to track down the little girls who'd come to my door. An internet search for local Girl Scout troops led me right to their homepage. Idiots. They had nothing secure on their page. I clicked right through their password protection and found and opened the file with their home addresses. I'd been surprised they didn't live close by. Those girls had one determined mother. I could only imagine what would push a mother to drag her daughters all over town selling cookies. But I liked it. I loved her ambition. It promised much in the days to come. I turned my attention to the playground and the kids running amok. The little brownie's sickly sweet laughter floated through the air, and her curls bounced every time she skipped or ran. Her older sister, the one carrying the frown, chased little Anna. Despite the twist in that girl's lips, she looked lovely with her long, flowing hair. Sunlight glinted off the straw-colored tresses, beckoning my fingers to comb through that perfection, to pull, to twist, to yank until her frightened eyes widened for me. But I wasn't here for the girl. I wanted the mother. Anna squealed as her sister chased her down the slide. She ran around the monkey bars, trying to get away. Our eyes met, and my heart leaped at the flash of recognition. But then her sister caught up to Anna, tagging her, and then Anna was off at a run, her turn to chase. Across the playground, their mother sat on a park bench with a book propped in her hands. She pretended to read, but her eyes followed every movement of her children at play. I sauntered over, taking my time. Yip led with his nose, smelling everything and lifting his leg along the way to mark territory he would never own. The method of my approach mattered, and I'd planned every detail. I wanted this woman to join my collection very much. She wasn't a beautiful woman by conventional standards, but she wasn't ugly either. Her hair glistened in the bright noonday sun, 2 shades darker than that of her children. Her broad nose didn't fit the delicate features of her heart-shaped face, but the brilliance of her eyes balanced everything out, and the way she adored her children made my heart ache, but I wanted her gaze for myself. With practice and training, she would worship me. I stopped at the opposite end of her bench, keeping a stranger's distance, and gave her a friendly smile when the dog licked at her shins. She didn't recognize me. I reeled the pooch in. Yip danced at the end of the leash, eager to explore the world. Putting my foot on the bench, I retied the laces of my shoe, then reached into my pocket, pretending my cell phone had gone off. I pressed the phone to my ear. With another easy smile, I turned my back and sat on the edge of the park bench. The dog jumped onto the bench, barking and sniffing the air. I scratched his neck while I palmed the phone to my ear. I twisted around to face forward, pretending I was listening hard to whoever had called. This way, I could see her reaction out of the corner of my eye. For the next few minutes, I carried on a conversation with myself and made sure she heard every word. "Kersey, stop." I shook my head and put a concerned expression on my face. The mother didn't move away, but she watched me with a wary eye. I didn't blame her. If I were a woman, I'd be suspicious if a strange man sat next to me at the park, especially one with no children of his own. But I had the dog, and I relaxed his lead. She reached out to let the mutt sniff her hand while I ignored her. I continued my fake conversation. No, you'll be okay. They got the guy. He's not getting out, not for a long, long time. I shifted, pulling the dog to my side. I gave a silent apology for my dog's misbehavior. In front of us, Anna and her sister carried on their game of tag, recruiting 2 other children into the fray. Come to my classes, Chrissy. You know I'm the best. I'll teach you everything you need to know. I'll even give you a discount if you come tonight. My gaze met the mother's beautiful blue eyes. I shifted away as if I was trying to keep my conversation private. I even covered the phone and lowered my voice, but my whisper was loud enough. She could still hear. Yes, you can bring your friends. Self-defense training is the most important skill a young woman can have. I pivoted so the mother could see more of my face. So far, there still had been no hint of recognition. You would think a man who gave an extra $50 for Girl Scout cookies would leave an impression. Thankless bitch. Yip licked her palm, and now she was scratching the top of his head. I interjected appropriate pauses into my conversation. I just needed to make it look like I was listening to Chrissy on the other end, just as I made sure the woman sitting next to me heard every word I said. You can't learn to defend yourself overnight. It takes hard work and dedication. The mother's eyes widened, and she leaned forward the tiniest bit, cocking her head to hear. Nosy, but good for me. Curiosity killed the cat, but I had no intention of taking this woman's life. Lucky for her, I wasn't like him. I don't remember what I said next. Chrissy wasn't real, but the mother was, and I had her attention. By the time I finished my fake conversation with fake Chrissy, all of the mother's unease from having a stranger share her bench would have dissipated. Time to reel her in. I gave the dog enough leash, and Yip crawled into her lap. Seriously, women made it too easy. Anna came racing out from under the slide, screaming at the top of her lungs, laughing as the little boy gave chase. She made a beeline for her mother.
Safe.
My little brownie stuck her tongue out at her pursuer.
Oh, look at the doggy,
She squealed. Only babies run to their mommies. The boy pinched Anna's arm.
Ow!
Anna rubbed at her arm and kicked the boy.
I'm not a baby.
Her mother yanked Anna away before the boy could retaliate. I couldn't have asked for a better introduction if I'd coached the little monster myself. To my delight, he reached out and pulled one of Anna's curls. Before her mother could react, I stood using my height to intimidate the little snot. Young man, that's no way to treat a lady. Yip emphasized my point with a bark. My scolding had the boy's eyes widening. I made sure I didn't touch him, but I had a performance to deliver. I exchanged a look with Anna's mother and shook my head. Where is your mother, young man? My demand made the poor little boy look like he would jump out of his skin. Every time the dog barked, he flinched. His face paled, but then he fisted his chubby fingers and puffed out his tiny chest. At that moment I respected him. His chubby finger pointed at Anna. She's a cheater, and she's a girl, not a lady. He pressed his fists to his hips and stared at me with indignation. The little growler would grow up into an asshole.
You pinched me.
My brownie whined and rubbed at the pink spot on her arm.
Now, children.
The mother soothed. She gave me one of those knowing looks adults use around children.
We need to use our words and not our hands.
I let Anna's mother lecture the children and sat, this time a little closer. She worked the magic only a female can accomplish with children. Within a few moments, everyone was friends again. Anna hopped off the bench. She pointed at me.
Don't I know you, mister?
My heart fluttered in my chest. I encouraged her with my voice, pitching it 2 octaves above my usual tenor. I'm not sure. I tried to sound unsure, non-threatening. Anna tugged on her mom's sleeve.
Mommy, He's the one who gave us the 50s. The nice man. He bought the cookies.
Anna bounced to her feet. She launched herself into my lap, hugged me, and then jumped back to the ground. I was still enough of a stranger for her to keep the physical contact brief. Kids? I turned to my prey with a shrug and a disarming smile. Theater class and the drama club had always intrigued me in high school, and I'd studied enough about acting to make this work. I lifted my finger and pointed to Anna. Why, yes, I remember you now. I let a trace of surprise lace my words. You're that little brownie who came to my door. Anna jumped up and down, clasping her hands in front of her chest, a very flat, prepubescent and boring chest.
Yes, you bought cookies.
Didn't you have a sister with you? Anna pointed to the playground.
Angela's playing hopscotch.
Well, you tell her hello for me. I loved my cookies. I ate them all up.
You shouldn't eat cookies all at once.
The expression on Anna's face made me smile.
It makes your tummy hurt. That's what Mommy says, and she knows everything.
Her words had me laughing. I turned to her mother, who gave me a children will say the darndest things expression. I know, but I was never good at following rules. Anna giggled and ran to the playground. Her interest in me had run its course. She'd even ignored the dog. A moment of silence passed between her mother and me, punctuated by the mutt's sniffing sounds. Her mother cleared her throat.
I'm sorry about Anna. She can be precocious.
Her cheeks flushed as she stared at me. I gave her my best Prince Charming grin and watched a spreading blush fill her cheeks. Well, at least she listens to what you say. But you may need to speak with her about stranger danger. I gestured, referring to the hug Anna gave me. The woman gave a nervous smile, and then silence befell us again. I wondered how long it would take before she broke it. In less than a minute, she turned to me.
So, is Anna right? Are you the one who gave my girls extra money?
I nodded. I'm a sucker for Girl Scout cookies.
It was very generous of you.
Well, I remember how hard it is to sell the dang things. She took a moment, and then made the wrong assumption.
Your daughter sells Girl Scout cookies?
No, my sister did. I let her assume my sister no longer did because she'd grown up. I thought the girls didn't go door to door anymore. Her lips pinched.
They're not supposed to, but I always buy a bunch extra. I like to contribute to the troupe. The girls get merit badges and prizes if they reach a certain level of sales.
She leaned back, her attention no longer focused on her children.
Maybe I should stop. I tire of walking the neighborhoods with them, and then I'm nervous when they knock on the doors. I mean, you never know who will answer, or if they'll be safe.
I laughed. Well, that's why I can't help buying them. I leaned back, mirroring her movements, and laced my fingers behind my neck. Some moms just let their kids go. They don't watch over them. My mother had failed in that sacred task.
They want to go out on their own, but I won't let them. I don't want to be a mother hen, but I worry. I let them go to the doors on their own, but I watch from the street.
Yes, I remember my mother watching my sister.
Right. What does your sister do now? Is she still involved in the Girl Scouts?
I turned to the woman, leaning an inch or two closer, and made ready to sing my sob story. I even had a tear or two ready. No, my sister died. She wasn't much older than Anna when it happened. An overshare, but I had her full attention now.
Oh, my.
Her hand flew up and covered her mouth.
I'm sorry.
As I weaved my story, I reeled her in like an expert fisherman. She had an odd name, Henrietta. Too old for her. It reminded me of my grandmother. It would be the first thing I changed. I turned the subject from my kid sister's death to something more cheerful, like how incredible Thin Mints tasted and how they reminded me of my sister. Our words danced in the air as we traded life stories. I learned more than I cared about her two little girls. The father who died fighting for freedom in the desert, and her plans. I tried not to stare at her breasts too much, but they were plump and begging to be squeezed. She pretended not to notice, just as I pretended not to stare. With her long blonde hair, brilliant blue eyes, and rosebud lips, this woman would have made a wonderful princess a decade ago. Fortunately, I didn't need a princess. She would fill a different role. Henrietta would be our fairy godmother, and I would give her a gilded cage. Her hands would fit in the spare set of steel cuffs in my chest. I knew how I would bind her and how I would take her our first time together. A fairy godmother would soothe my princess's fears. I shifted on the park bench, hiding my growing arousal from Henrietta's observant eyes. She'd given me her name and sealed her fate when she brushed lint off my shoulder. Henrietta continued to watch her precious girls play chase, but her gaze kept turning back to me. I gave her my best smile. It has been such a pleasure meeting you again, but I must go. I only get so much time off from work. And I need to get Yip home. Her expression fell to a frown. That made my heart leap with joy.
It was nice chatting with you.
What a perfect day. The longing in her voice was brilliant. I placed my hand on her knee and paid close attention to her reaction. When she didn't pull away, I gave it a slight squeeze. If you still have some of those Girl Scout cookies, I winked, and her cheeks flushed again. You could bring them over. I wasn't lying when I told your daughter I ate them all. Henrietta waved her hand in a dismissive gesture. She had yet to pull away from my hand resting on her knee.
Well, Anna was just
She was just repeating what any good mother would tell her child. I lifted my brows with mischief. But you and I are adults. We don't have to listen to our mothers anymore. One perk of being a grown-up is we can be as good or as bad as we want. She laughed.
Well.
She hesitated, then continued, her voice husky and sinfully seductive.
That's true.
I almost had her, and the anticipation had me leaning closer than I should, but I couldn't help it. If you can't come over, I understand, but I would like a chance to get to know you better. I removed my hand from her leg and smiled at her surprised expression.
Oh, I can bring some by.
Her lashes fluttered.
I'm sorry, but I don't remember where you live.
I gave her the address.
The girls get off school at 3. We can stop by after that?
I shook my head. I'm sorry, but I work the graveyard shift at a garden center, and I'm asleep by then.
A nursery has a graveyard shift?
It's a large operation, and most of the prep work and arranging is left to the night crew. I work in the floral department. I deliver, too. Women were suckers for flowers. A beautiful play of expressions paraded across her delicate features as she considered her options. I loved it when they came willingly. It made the surprise so much more delectable when they realized that they'd delivered themselves into my hands. Henrietta glanced at me, looking through her lashes.
I could come sooner, but the girls won't be able to give you the cookies themselves.
I gave half a laugh. Henrietta, as darling as your children are, I'm much more interested in getting to know you. I stressed the word know. Henrietta knew what she was coming over for, and it wasn't to deliver cookies. Lunch at 10? My question hovered in the air between us, and my pulse quickened, waiting for her reply. Her eyes flicked to mine. I was thrilled to see a banked heat smoldering in their depths. How perfect of a day was this for me, a mother and a widow. She said it had been a year since G.I. Dickhead's death. It might be fun to take her in my bed before bringing her to join my princesses. She would live with the knowledge she'd given herself freely for the rest of her life. In my head, I'd already fucked her in every way imaginable. My pants were so tight that my cock ached to be free. Time to wrap this up.
Are you offering to cook for me?
She was such an idiot. I'm a fabulous cook. She bit her lower lip, considering my offer of food and sex. I leaned over and pecked her cheek. I'll expect you at 10. Tomorrow, bring Thin Mints for dessert. Her hand flew to her cheek, cupping the spot where my lips touched her skin. She bowed her head and her lashes fluttered again. Before she could consider backing out, I was off the bench, careful to turn my body to hide my arousal. It's a date. She nodded but didn't look up.
Yes. Tomorrow.
The resolve in her tone sent shudders through my spine. Tomorrow, I would add a fairy godmother to my collection. All that remained was collecting my queen. 8. Broken Towers. CJ. When CJ arrived at the prison, the string of expletives streaming from his mouth would have made a sailor proud. The triple fencing surrounding the front and one side of the massive structure was missing. A swath of destruction 100 yards wide marred the ground for half a mile. Aiming straight as an arrow, trees, grass, and the top layer of soil had all been scoured from the earth. Bits and pieces of twisted metal littered the area. Parts of cars and other wreckage were vaguely recognizable. A bumper lay crumpled in the arms of a tree. A car's hood folded itself around a telephone pole. There was even one car, a little Fiat, perched on top of an old oak tree. The majestic giant had weathered the storm well, with only a few splintered branches beneath the car decorating its canopy. In the parking lot, several cars lay on their sides. A few rested on their roofs, and their tires pointed to the sun. All around, diligent guards stood watch, weapons ready, while other men in dirty orange jumpers stacked debris into piles. A forklift moved shredded lengths of fencing. A bulldozer growled at the edge of a field, stacking twisted metal into a massive heap. This bullshit had better not fuck with the execution. He'd taken time off from the Guardians, pulled himself off an active case to be here. It meant leaving Delta Team in the capable hands of his second-in-command, Jenny, a feisty woman climbing the ranks within Guardian HRS. She had her eye on his command and would probably get it soon. Jenny's ambitions aside, if that bastard still pulled breath by the end of the day, CJ would have words with someone. He pulled up to the gatehouse. The small structure stood untouched despite the devastation less than 10 feet away. The guard, a massive black man, raised a hand and held his palm out, commanding CJ to stop. He lowered the driver's side window, an unnecessary move considering he no longer had a front windshield. "Sorry, no visitors." The guard rested a hand on his weapon while his gaze took in CJ and the damage to his car. "I'm not here to visit. I'm here for an execution." And he would be late if this guy didn't get a move on. He had to check in by 5 for the 6 o'clock execution. The guard rubbed a hand over the back of his neck. "Family or press?" "Family." Thoughts of his sister flitted in his head. Her laughter, her smiles, the touches of her anger when he didn't let her have her way. All of it was gone. "I see." The guard twisted his mouth. "I've got bad news." "Bad news?" CJ pounded the steering wheel. The guy better not say it. His blood heated with anger and frustration pulled at his chest. He gripped the steering wheel and tried to calm himself before he said something stupid. The guard spit on the ground. "Been postponed." "Postponed?" He closed his eyes and counted to 3. The guard placed his free hand on the doorframe of CJ's car and leaned in. "I'm sorry, but—" "Did the bastard get a stay of execution from the governor?" "No." "Will it be rescheduled?" The guard waved at the destruction around the prison. "Twister took down all the power lines. Hit one of our backup generators. Warden had to delay it." CJ's knuckles turned white, and his teeth ached from clenching his jaw. There was a strange quiver in his gut, an unsettled feeling twisting him from the inside out. The guard looked unsure. "Don't think this kind of thing happens too often. Might be considered an act of God. If that's the case, then—" "Acts of God don't cancel executions, at least not anymore. So, what do I do now?" He'd taken off a week from work. One day to drive to this godforsaken town. 1 to witness the execution, 2 days to drive to his sister's grave and pay his respects, 2 days to drive back. The final day was for him. Time to de-stress before returning to the rigors of his job as a guardian. Don't know, except I've been told to tell all the family and reporters of the delay. Someone will be in contact with you. The guard pointed to a TV news crew setting up their satellite antenna. Those bastards aren't upset by the delay. Twister taken out of state prison is just as good of news as an execution. CJ gave the guy a non-committal grunt. Looks like you saw action. The guard gave a pointed look at the missing windshield. Hail, CJ said. The guard's brows drew together. Looks like more than hail. The guard huffed a low laugh. He gave the poor SUV a once-over with his eyes. I thought we had it bad. Looks like you did, too. With a sharp nod, CJ answered, hid in a parking garage. Then you know what it was like? The guard pointed to a tower at the corner of the field. Huge chunks of the brick walls were missing, as if someone had taken a bite out of the stone. The roof was gone. I was in that tower when the twister hit. Ducked into the stairwell. It sucked the roof like it was candy. Almost took my buddy Randy, but Abel and I held on to him. Held him? How could 2 men hold a man during a twister? Twister tried to suck him into the sky? Dude, you cannot imagine. The guy's gaze traveled along CJ's rented SUV. Well, maybe you can. About shit my pants. Randy pissed his, but I guess when you're saying goodbye to your life, that's allowed. Randy's lucky. Not quite. Popped both of his shoulders out of their sockets as we held on to him, and his legs got shredded by the debris. Sent him to St. John's. Heard they're busy. They are. His mind turned to Melissa. She should be in surgery by now. Who'd be there when she woke? That bastard at the other end of her phone hurt her. Or would she wake to an empty room, afraid and alone? God, he felt like such an ass for leaving. The guard continued to ramble. Yeah, we grabbed Randy's arms and just held on. Longest 20 seconds of my life. 20 seconds? You counted? The guard shrugged. Guessing? Seemed like forever. With an easygoing attitude, the guard was hard to shut up. CJ didn't like the way the guard's finger kept tapping the trigger guard of his weapon. He'd seen plenty of men like that. The stress of a traumatic event made them jumpy and dangerous. It was time to leave, except his senses screamed something wasn't right. The one thing his time in the army had taught him was to listen to his gut. He wasn't a superstitious guy, but you didn't live long in his line of work if you ignored your spidey sense. And his was yelling in his ear. He glanced at the damage done to the tower. Did it cause any damage to the prison? The guard paused a beat too long before answering. Nothing. Serious. CJ didn't like the hesitation in the guard's voice, or the way his eyes had cut to the high-security area. Something was up. His vision clarified, narrowing down to one small point. He pulled in a breath, held it, and then slowly let it out. This feeling he knew all too well. More information was required, but this guy wasn't going to let him dig around a prison in chaos. What he needed was best done over drinks. He read the name tag on the guard's uniform. Officer Reynolds, how long have you been on shift? You look like crap. Been here since night shift began. With a low whistle, CJ struggled to find something to say. Chatty Reynolds made things easy. My shift was ending when that storm blew through. Couldn't leave, and now I have to wait for relief. National Guard is on its way. As soon as they get here, I'm headed for a drink. Do you know Grady's pub back in town? CJ couldn't have asked for a better lead-in. Heck yeah, best pub in town. The only place that serves beer in the morning. Me and the guys usually unwind there after our shift. Well, Grady's is still standing. Why don't you and your buddies stop by when you get off? I'll buy a round as thanks for what you're doing here. He leaned forward, making a show of looking around. You know, if you need an extra hand, I've got experience. Prison's on lockdown? Reynolds said with a shake of his head. Go back to your hotel and someone will get in contact with you. How about that drink? Damn, he wanted to poke around the prison and see what had everyone on edge. After the day I've had? Shit, that sounds damn fine. Reggie glanced up the road, and a broad smile lit his face. He pointed to a convoy packed with National Guardsmen. Looks like the cavalry has arrived. Well, there you go, Officer Reynolds. Shit, call me Eggs. Everyone does. CJ nodded. Charles Rowan, Jr., and my friends call me CJ. Cool. Don't know how long this song and dance will last, CJ, but I'll be there for drinks for sure. Like I said, first round's on me. CJ's eyes narrowed as he watched the trucks approach. That was more than a little help. Something was up. CJ pulled forward until he could turn his car around. The men in the convoy looked serious. Grim expressions were plastered on their faces. They were kitted out, too, with bulletproof vests and weapons. 10 trucks were a significant force, more than should be required to guard a prison, even when the outer fencing had been ripped to shreds. Noting the small things kept him alive. It was what made him an excellent Green Beret. It's how he got recruited as a Delta operative, the most elite force in the military. Egg's hesitation and the too many National Guardsmen were both questions he'd have the answers to after buying Eggs and his friends a couple of rounds of beer. In particular, he wanted to know what was up with the high-security area. Shared tragedy, heroism, and plenty of booze loosened men's tongues. Fortunately, he had the perfect story to share. 9. Yellow Lace. Pierce. My fairy godmother arrived at my place at 10 a.m. I peered through the slats of my kitchen blinds and watched her approach. Henrietta hesitated, glanced back at the street, and then back toward the house. I guess she was deciding whether to go through with our rendezvous. The brave woman clutched a box of thin mints in her delicate hands. Henrietta wore a lacy yellow dress, prim and pretty. It wasn't something a woman wore when she intended to have sex. That worried me. I didn't want to force our first time together. That would come later. I had an idea. Her yellow heels gave her some trouble on the uneven walkway, but she came to me with a determined stride. Excitement itched along my skin as I watched through my kitchen window. My preparations were in order. The kitchen was spotless except for what I had set out for lunch. Through the archway, the living room was neat and tidy. The love seat stood ready and welcoming, with throw pillows and a soft cover-up. I had piled the 2 wing-back chairs full of books. We were to sit together, not apart. I had even changed the sheets on my bed. It would be the first and last consideration I gave Henrietta. I had hidden a video camera in the spine of one of the books. I had it primed where all I had to do was hit one button. Afterward, I'd make her watch the video over and over again. I intended to keep it looping beside her cage, a constant reminder of her willing participation and how eagerly she'd given herself to me. Energy sizzled through my body, making me jump when a hesitant knock sounded on the door. My heart hammered beneath my breastbone. I was so excited to welcome her home. I didn't answer. The silence stretched until she knocked again. Pressing my forehead against the door, I stared through the keyhole. She was damn adorable, chewing on her lower lip. I waited until she raised her hand to knock a 3rd time and then pulled the door open. I took her raised hand and kissed it. The richness of her scent, light and floral, had me grinning ear to ear. She was perfect. Older than what I usually collected, but still innocent and naive.
Oh, my.
She exclaimed as I let my arms wrap around her waist. Henrietta endured a much more intimate welcome than she may have expected, and, to my delight, she didn't pull away. It gave me an opening to kiss her cheek and keep my hands wrapped around her waist. "Hello," I murmured in my most seductive voice. She flushed and tried to stand on her own, but I pulled her across the threshold, keeping her in my embrace. It was one of those open, awkward holds you only saw at the beginning of a first date. But she'd have to get used to my touch. Might as well start now. Come in, Henrietta. Sorry I didn't get to the door sooner. I was preoccupied. The first of many lies I would tell. Truth was for later. I released my hold on her waist and took the box of Thin Mints out of her hand. She didn't pull away. Henrietta took a moment to compose herself, but pink dusted her cheeks. Even her breathing was uneven. I tried to remember how long ago her husband had died. When was the last time this woman had been held down by a man and truly fucked? No wonder she was nervous. I gave her a most charming smile. Holding a beautiful woman in my arms is the perfect beginning to a long day. I lifted my brows for the briefest moment to confirm I was interested in more than a simple lunch. Now was the time for her to decide whether to stay or go. If she had any sense, she would run back to her car. Instead, she followed me to the kitchen. Her gaze passed over my prep bowls.
Looks like you know what you're doing.
I nodded. I went to culinary school for a few years. The monotony of cooking soothed me.
Are you a chef? I thought you worked for a florist.
I was a chef for a time, never a job that panned out. And now, as you know, I work nights in the floral department at a gardening center. I'm a man of many talents. I can arrange a bouquet and whip up a delectable feast. I was a woman's wet dream and her worst nightmare.
I couldn't imagine sleeping through the day. Must be strange.
I black out the curtains in my bedroom, and I invested in soundproofing on all the walls. That was true, but not for the reasons she thought. She nodded. Poor thing had no idea. I gestured to a stool. Sit. Do you like red or white wine?
It's 10 in the morning,
She exclaimed.
I rarely drink this early.
I gave a false laugh. Sorry, my days and nights are messed up. For me, it's late evening. I usually have something before bed. I lifted a bottle of white wine. You sure you won't drink with me? She did that thing with her lip again. Total turn-on. I intended to make use of that mouth after we ate. For now, that tiny sign of her nervousness made the swelling in my pants all the more uncomfortable. She hesitated for what seemed like forever. I turned my back to her to hide my irritation. If she didn't say yes soon, I would slap her stupid face and carry her downstairs. Fortunately, she agreed. Good thing. I was hungry and wanted to eat before we had sex. I poured 2 glasses of wine, using my body to block what I was doing as I added a white powder to her drink. It would make her pliable without drugging her too much. I handed her the wine. Cheers.
Cheers.
She repeated.
To new friendships?
Oh, we would be more than friends. To new possibilities. Her flushing came easily. I loved how transparent her emotions were. She must have felt brave because she lifted her glass a second time.
To new possibilities.
We drank to new possibilities, while I decided how I would fuck her first. I drank from my glass, watching her take 2 deep swallows. Time to lower the heat, make her comfortable, and tone down the references to our pending sex fest. I would lose her if I was too aggressive, even with the drug in her system. I wanted her pliable and lucid, not passed out. For the next 40 minutes, we chatted while I made lunch. I boiled pasta and whipped up a cream sauce, which I let her taste, teasing her as I did. A few minutes later, her words slurred, and her lids drooped. I asked her to prep the salad, and she accomplished the task without complaint or further direction. She poured a second glass of wine for me and then put a generous amount into her cup. The more the wine bottle emptied, the less inhibited she became. I took advantage of every opportunity to touch her, lengthening my caresses as the morning drew on. As I finished my Alfredo sauce, I had her taste one last time. I purposefully dripped the sauce on her chin. When I leaned in to lick it off, she grew still as a statue, but she didn't push me away. I didn't kiss her, although I wanted to. I nearly came right there, tasting the sweetness of her skin. Instead, I took her hand and led her to the table. Come, let's set the table. A look of disappointment flickered across her face. I was getting to that. She helped with the table, and I told her to have a seat while I served our plates. She complied, following my direction. That would serve her well in the days to come. Lunch proceeded rather innocently. I sat across from her, and we traded nothing of consequence for most of the meal. As I poured her a third glass of wine, we gazed into each other's eyes, and then her foot tentatively touched my shin. She looked at me through her lashes, her eyes glazed from the wine and the effects of the drug. I smiled. Maybe we should retire to the living room? Henrietta wobbled as she stood.
I'll clear the table.
I came around and put my arm around her waist. The table will wait. I can't. Her eyes darted to the empty couch and then to the hallway leading deeper into my home.
I
placed my finger over her lips, silencing her. We won't do anything you don't want to do. Come, let's sit on the couch and talk. There's no rush. Her eyes flicked back to the hallway and then to the couch. She wanted to go to my room, but I steered her to the living room instead. She would think well of my control later.
It's just...
Her hands trembled, and her voice shook.
I haven't been with anyone since Joe's death.
I pulled her close. Let's just talk. Time enough for more later. The tension in her body eased at my words. I settled her on the couch and sat beside her. With an arm wrapped around her shoulders, I pulled her close. Tell me about your husband. She sniffed and tensed.
No, Joe's not here anymore, and it's past time I moved on.
She turned to face me.
Will you kiss me, please? Like, really kiss me?
10. Round of beer. CJ. CJ was deep into his second beer by the time Eggs and a few of his co-workers arrived at Grady's pub. He called out to the tired men and ordered 2 pitchers of beer, a platter of wings, chips, salsa, and loaded potato fries. Eggs saw to the introductions. This is Tony. CJ shook hands with the young man. He had a neck as thick as his biceps, and a skull perhaps a few inches thicker. You ex-military? CJ had been out of the military for years, but he hadn't given up on the signature buzz cut. He could always tell who was ex-military. Yeah. Tony's grip was firm. 4 years in the Marines. Perfect. That connection would bond them. Now for a few drinks to loosen Tony's tongue. I spent 4 years with the Green Berets and then another tour with Delta Force. Badass, Tony said. Told you he was cool? Eggs continued the introductions. This here is Abel. Abel thrust out his hand. Nice to meet you, CJ. Eggs told me you saved a life. Abel was an older gentleman and still thick with muscle. His face was deeply pockmarked, and CJ knew all about Abel's wife, 5 kids, 7 grandbabies, plus 2 more on the way within 20 minutes. Talk about Abel's kids had Eggs pulling out a photo of his son, a 17-year-old star of the football team. Stories flowed from there, growing louder and wilder as the day continued. CJ bought more beer. Conversation flew from one topic to the next in a rapid-fire barrage of boasting, laughing, and general competitiveness for the most outrageous tale. The men traded insults as CJ ordered the 4th round. The volume around the table escalated. Eggs hit CJ on the arm. Tell us your story. I want to hear about your tornado. No fucking way. Abel tossed back his beer and flagged their waitress down. You saw one too? Eggs leaned forward and pressed his finger to the tabletop. That's not something I ever want to see again. Abel and Eggs shared a moment. Having had a close call with the tornado himself, CJ could only imagine what the two of them had endured. Tony sighed. I was stuck inside the walls. All I heard was something like a freight train bearing down on us, and then there was that explosion. Explosion? CJ leaned forward and refilled everyone's cups. Yeah, when the generators blew, Tony said. Caused a bit of damage, and then the... Abel reached out and smacked Tony on the back of the head. Shut your trap, asshole. Something had happened at the prison, and the men weren't supposed to talk about it. CJ would have to dig deeper. Oh, CJ's cool. Eggs took the pitcher from CJ and emptied the last of the beer into his mug. Abel stared at his beer. The alcohol had turned his cheeks rosy and made his eyes unfocused. CJ was already counting out cab fares home for the men. Tony turned to CJ. Egg said you outran a tornado. Tell us your story. He wanted to hear more about the damage at the prison, but if he pried too hard, the men would clam up. Their waitress stopped at the table and distributed shots that Tony ordered. He gave the girl a fat tip and a smack on her ass. She left with a roll of her eyes and a smile on her face. It started with a bolt of lightning. And a woman. CJ lifted his shot glass and raised it for a toast. He began his story with the smack of his shot glass thudding on the table. No shit, Tony said. Was she hot? Very. CJ said. Even hotter after I got a look at the pink lace of her bra. No fucking way, Tony said with a hoot. I needed to see her injuries. That's why I had her strip. Seriously? Egg said. You rescued a woman and got her out of her clothes in the middle of a fucking tornado. Tony slapped him on the back. Dude, you're my hero. CJ shook his head. It wasn't like that. Did you get her number? Tony asked. Not her number, but he had her phone. CJ shrugged. Nothing happened. Turns out she's married into a royal ass. He described the odd phone conversation. Wait, so you have her phone? Eggs gave CJ a look. She lost it in the back of the car. They wanted to hear more about the tornado, and he obliged. As time wore on, his thoughts turned back to Tony's comments about the explosion. The number of National Guardsmen he'd seen in that convoy had him wondering if something more was up. He challenged Tony to a game of darts. The music climbed higher. Laughter roared, and the boasts became more spectacular. This wasn't CJ's first dance party. He threw alcohol at the men, and they guzzled it down. Meanwhile, he sipped at his drinks, switching to Long Island iced tea, which the barkeep made virgin after a few hushed words and a fat tip. At the end of the night, he called for 2 cabs. Eggs and Abel rolled into one and headed off down the street. Tony lived on the other side of town. CJ held out a hand and shook Tony's. Hey, good thing those National Guard troops came when they did, right? He needed to know what had happened at the prison. Tony's speech slurred. Yeah, gotta get manhunts started as quick as possible. He wobbled. Don't worry, only 2 got out. Tony staggered into the cab. Guardsmen will have them returned in no time. He needed to confirm what he feared. Yeah, especially when it involves inmates on death row like the Fairytale murderer. What's his name? Ain't that right? Tony swayed on his feet. That's why they're keeping it hush-hush. If people knew... Tony blinked and shut his mouth. Not confirmation, but pretty damn close. Tony piled into the cab and the car took off. Patterson had escaped. CJ felt it in his bones. With no evidence except the damage at the prison and the drunken slur from a guard, CJ's blood ran cold. He needed to make a call.
We hope you have enjoyed this unabridged production of Rescuing Melissa, The Guardian Hostage Rescue Specialists, Book 1. Written by Ellie Masters. Narrated by Aubrey Vincent and Matt Haynes. This program was produced for JEM Publishing, LLC. Text copyright 2018 by Ellie Masters. Performance and production copyright 2021 by Ellie Masters.
Hello, this is Ellie Masters, and I hope that you enjoyed the second 5 chapters of my romantic suspense novel, Rescuing Melissa. We're about a fifth of the way into this spine-chilling romance. I like to think of this book as romantic suspense meets The Silence of the Lambs, and at the end, you can tell me if you agree or not. If you found Pierce to be a spine-chilling villain, just wait until Scott, the Fairytale Killer, gets back out into the world. But don't lose faith. CJ is on the case, and he's a guardian, and guardians never fail. I hope you're enjoying Rescuing Melissa, a spine-tingling thriller and steamy romantic suspense all rolled into one. Make sure you don't miss out on the rest of Rescuing Melissa. Like this video and subscribe to my channel, and don't forget to tap the bell to be notified when new chapters are posted for your audio reading enjoyment. Let me know what you think in the comments. I can't wait to read your thoughts. And while you're waiting for more, you can check me out at elliemasters.com, and you can check out all my books at elliemasters.com/books. Or you can find my books on Amazon at elliemasters.com/Amazon. And if you're a Kindle Unlimited subscriber, you're in luck because you can read all of my books for free. Until next time, this is Ellie Masters, bringing you the best of romantic suspense.